Okay.
Hey guys, what happened? I had to use the bathroom.
Classic Virgil.
We are back. Virgil is back from the bathroom. And so yeah, we haven't done this since Ross Douthat's Privilege. We haven't done a full book report. This is like one level up from the reading series because it's a whole book. And like I said, all 5 of us are here because the book had exactly 10 chapters. And there's no fucking way I could read more than 2 of these chapters, nor would I inflict that on anyone.
Yeah, I think I was supposed to read 10 and 11, but I was never very good at paying attention to instructions.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I
apologize if I stepped on anyone's toes.
I read the first chapter I was supposed to, but like halfway through the second, stuff started getting blurry, and I kind of just... light kind of retracted to a small pin, and
right.
I woke up. I was nude in a TGI Fridays.
So what you're saying, guys, is that you didn't do the homework assignment.
I read it. It's just that I don't know how much of it was imprinted on my brain after the fugue state.
So what did you guys think of the book?
Well, for one thing, first off, fuck her for stealing a line from the amazing song "What It's Like" by Everlast for her title.
After doing this, I just got to say, to hell with anyone who shames us for the amount of money we get, because we're working hard for it.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. I read this last night. Read my 2 I put off reading my 2 chapters until last night because I was hoping that maybe one of us would die. Maybe we wouldn't be able to do the episode. Maybe we would split up as a show and I wouldn't have to do it if I waited until the last minute. But no, nothing. Here we are, and I have to read it. And it reminded me of a lot of books that came in the last year of the Clinton years when the dumbest people alive were like, well, we did welfare reform and NAFTA, so we're done with all the systemic problems, and now we have to tackle problems of perception. But this was written in 2014. This was very recent.
Well, these people haven't really aged ideologically.
No, they still think they're living in 1998. They're like, the problems are basically all gone. So,
but before we actually get into the book itself, who is Meghan McCardle, if you had to describe her to someone who is not familiar with her work?
She's from a little thing called the conservative blogosphere.
Yeah, she started out...
so she's a nerd.
Yeah, she's a nerd who started out blogging under the name Jane Galt.
Oh my God. Okay, then I know more about her than I thought I did.
Yeah. She's a...
Well, you were a Jane Goldhead. You were
a
total Goldhead.
That's what got Amber into writing.
She's I don't know, libertarian, conservative hack who's also...
I only ever see her kind of pop up when people are quoting her saying something horrifying.
Yeah, some of her greatest hits include "Healthcare is a business, not a right."
Virgil and Felix annotated "Healthcare is a business, not a right."
We'll link to that. It's going to take up way too much time to go through every one of her atrocities. So maybe I think we could just link to that profile that Real Ames Hours did, Yasha and Real Ames Hours did about Meghan McCardle, because it has everything there, and it is amazing to read it all together just to see how odious and corrupt she is.
She's basically a female Iglesias if his head was shaped like a circus peanut instead of a milk.
You know what? Before we really dive into it, I wrote some notes about what kind of a book this is, what genre of bullshit this is. And so we talked about the end of history era of liberalism that came during the Clinton years. Well, this is something different. This is the end of truth. And it started when Malcolm Gladwell would write books dipshit, why stupid people are smart, or fucking squish, why some blueberries are wet instead of dry. And that's what happens when you lie about a war and the country implodes because of 9/11 and you did everything that Osama bin Laden wanted you to. You have to make up and up, down and down up, because in that case, nothing's horrifying. You're maybe killing 1 million Arabs is good because we're going to have some good market consequences. But that sort of went away after Obama ran, but it only existed when you go to a website like Elite Daily and the articles are why millennials who drink pee-pee, eat shit, procrastinate, swear, don't sleep, jack off, are virgins, are depressed, stupid, and perform incest are geniuses, have high IQs, and are your new boss. And but it disappeared mostly from literature, except for Meghan, who is stuck in time. She's like stuck in like fossilized thing.
Felix, the first note I have in front of me after reading this is this book is for the type of people who type of person who finds Malcolm Gladwell a little too brainy.
Yeah, that's
And then my second note is this is a book for people who look forward to going on company-sponsored leadership retreats. Look, like I said, the last time we did this was for Ross Douthat's Privilege, right? Which, if you listen back to that show, you'll find that we were actually we gave Ross his due. There were glimmers in that book that I thought were well written and would be funny if he were just like 10% of a different person and not who he actually is.
Right.
That being said, okay, this book is a horror show. There is absolutely no humanity in any of these pages. She is a complete reptile.
Yeah.
It's honestly, just the soul-rending banality of this book is.
I was mainly digging into the like poor shaming chapters, and I was shocked because this woman who I knew she would say horrible things, but like, and I had read some of her like terrible shit about healthcare before. But first of all, she looks like she's like the Lisa Loeb of objectivism. Like she doesn't.
You know those
like
glasses aren't real. You know that's fucking glass panes in there. Those are no prescriptions.
And
but
you
she doesn't seem like she would be that evil in long form. But she's a truly heartless, terrible person who says, well, if you lose your job, cut down on your grocery bills.
Yeah.
Which is like, groceries mean food, right? That's what groceries are.
Well, in her article, "Healthcare is a Business, Not a Right," she's like, most people, like for some stupid reason, seem to recoil at the idea that we should be making profit off of people's sickness. They don't think that way about food.
Oh my god.
She's like, should we take the profit out of farming?
Yeah. Everyone should have food stamps.
Hang on, before we go further, Meghan she's a nepotist, right?
Yeah.
Like me, she is also a child of New York City.
sister.
Yeah, she's my sister. she went through. She got
Is
into
Lisa Loeb also your sister?
she got into the Riverdale, the good New York City private school, and I had to go to the also ran bad one because she was smarter and worked harder
Riverdale,
than
that's
me.
a private school from the Archie comics.
Yeah, Archie and the gang had to kick Will out whenever he would snoop around the campus.
Stay out of Riverdale.
Yeah, but she really keeps it up in long form. It's not just for the blog form.
I know.
She didn't create an entire text of being a monster.
It really is amazing. Needless to say, her whole thesis about how you should fail early and often, and being a failure is good. It just keep in mind only basically an incredibly affluent person can say this without any self-awareness whatsoever, which is the point of this book. So on last episode, on the premium sode, so subscribe, I read from the god-awful preface to this book, but I just want to sort of restate if there's anything close to a thesis statement in this book, that's a stretch because this book is meandering gobbledygook. It's from the preface. She writes, "We should stop spending so much energy trying to avoid failure or engineer it away. Instead, we should embrace it smartly. Failing well can't be that hard because America spent several centuries being really good at it. We're the descendants of failures who fled to these shores from their creditors, their failed farms, their disastrous love affairs. If things didn't work out in New York, we picked up and moved to North Dakota. Somewhere along the way, we built...
Which doesn't cost money.
Somewhere along the way, we built the biggest, richest country in the world. And I'm going to argue we did it mostly because we were willing to risk more, forgive more easily than most other countries." I like that.
And massacre the shit out of a bunch of indigenous people. It's so interesting because the whole unspoken thing in this book is how all of her fuck-ups, her talking about how, well, you have to be able to fail to succeed. All of that is made possible by the incredible cushion provided by her rich family. And similarly, America's myriad fuck-ups were largely taken care of by the fact that you could always just move out of town, kill whoever had the land, and then take
Well, you-
claim
Matt,
to it.
You could also we had this really cheap labor form there for a
Yes,
while
Amber.
too that we got to build an entire agricultural basis for, which is very, very affordable labor.
Yeah, stunning lack of self-awareness there. And okay, I'm going to dive in now. I read the first 2 chapters and we divvied up the rest of the book. I would just like to say we are doing one better than McGriddle herself, who famously reviewed Thomas Piketty's Capital in the 21st Century.
Right.
First sentence saying, now I haven't read this book, but
Yeah, of course.
she says, I have not read this book yet. To be clear, I intend to read Capital in the 21st Century.
No, you don't.
It is sitting on my virtual
No one does.
bedside with a big stack of other books that I intend to read, but it's far down in the queue, and I'm afraid that I can't weigh in. Not on the book itself, but on its topic.
I like that she's just apologizing over and over for not having read the
How
book.
much does inequality matter? According to Meghan, not at all.
It doesn't even matter enough for you to read the book about it that you are reviewing.
Yeah. It's very inconsequential.
Yeah, I mean, you can just use that review to talk about whatever. Talk about Gundam. Talk about, vitamin gummies. Are they too delicious? Do you end up eating too many gummies?
I forget the exact joke, but I picture her like that one Simpsons gag where Homer's like reading a book about entrepreneurship and then throws it in the trash and then reading Business for Dummies, and then he's just reading the dictionary. And
You're looking up inequality in the dictionary. So yeah, so reading the the thing about McMegan is that she's an incredibly clumsy and ham-fisted writer, and with every writer, there's always a tell, there's always a tick and a crutch. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but for her, it's when she tries to add these little flourishes of humor and chattiness to what is essentially a business book, and it lands flat every time. Her crutch is this kind of faux casual attempts to be personable, and it's more grating and awful than you can possibly imagine.
They actually use this as a textbook in gay conversion therapy schools.
Okay, let's get into this. Like I said, I'm gonna kick things off here with chapters 1 and 2. The first chapter is entitled "Failure is Fundamental." The subhead is "How a brain scientist and a psychologist help me stop procrastinating."
According to psychology.
So I took notes. I'm gonna summarize this chapter as best I can. So in the first section, she describes a quote spaghetti problem. It's one of these dumb team building exercises. You're supposed to build a platform out of spaghetti and scotch tape.
Oh my God.
And her point is that kindergarteners actually succeeded at this task better than engineers. And the reason they succeeded is because children are stupid failures who are too dumb to know any better. So they don't fear failure, and any mistake they make doesn't matter and won't affect them. Entrepreneurs and businesses should be like this. They grow through failure, and in this chapter she talks to a bunch of dipshit CEOs and shoehorns in some spurious brain science about dopamine to show how, I'm not kidding, the brain is quote a fail machine. I want to give you one example.
That was the original title for the podcast, actually.
Oh, dude, the fail machine, dude, I love that. Can we change the name of the show now?
Yeah.
I just want to give you one example of her atrocious writing when she's describing the spaghetti problem. She says she's talking about the ones that the kindergartners built, and she describes them as the wild asymmetrical kindergarten creations lurched drunkenly like modern art installations on a debauched spree. It makes no fucking sense. That's
Wait.
She said
Say it again.
like modern art installations on a debauched spree.
You know how art just kind of goes on a tear sometimes, paints the town red. What art does sometimes.
Yeah, when you go into the museum after dark and all the paintings come alive. And you're Ben Stiller.
She, like I said, she speaks to these CEO dipshits and describes one guy as He is the distilled essence of a successful entrepreneur, lean and compact, with an intense dark gaze and a hypomanic charm that you find in so many business leaders.
Craig Britton. There was another sort of successful entrepreneur, spent a lot of time in bed, did most of his work in bed, but he invented these sessions where his employees sort of would get together in a circle, and one of them would get in the middle and everyone would scream about their failures. That CEO's name was Chairman Mao.
There is a CEO, a famous corporate leader, who he wrote his book about the future, but most of the book was actually about his failures.
Yes,
And it was also
his struggles, if
His
you will.
struggle, yeah. And the regulators, as it were, who got in his way his entire life. But he said, you know what? I'm not giving up, and neither should you. And he was kind of similar to Elon Musk because he developed like a train concept, I guess you could say. But anyway, yeah.
I don't want to get too bogged down. Like, I took so many notes. There's so many atrocious examples here of just terrible writing and even worse thinking. But like, he has one section called "The opposite of failure is not safety; it's nothing." Drivel, absolute drivel.
That's
again,
something a cult leader.
Yeah, it's unreadable, like sub-Gladwellian horseshit, where she talks to a Stanford expert on procrastination and discusses the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Meghan says she suffers from a mixed mindset.
Yeah, I would definitely one of those. I'm not stupid. I have a mixed mindset.
How come Scientology hasn't gotten to Meghan yet? Like, that's an easy get.
Chapter 2 crosses over from being merely stupid drivel to actually being evil, because here she begins with her account of the California's energy market deregulation and blackout crisis in the year 2000. And she uses this to completely exonerate Enron from their role in engineering this catastrophe. And makes sense because over and over again in this book, like, the template for her beliefs about failure is that large corporations and wealthy people should be allowed to fail over and over again and never to be held to account for anything they do. And if they fuck up or like blow up the world economy, then who's to say who's really to blame, because it's all so complicated. However, if you're an individual, like, for instance, she blames individual consumers for not shopping around or being better informed about their utility providers after market deregulation. I had to highlight this line. She writes, "Why is it easy to get rich in America and hard to get rich in Zimbabwe?" The answer may surprise you.
I talked to my friend, expert Charles Murray.
You know what? You know what? No, it would not surprise me at all. I'm sorry.
And, okay, she has a section called "Why Does Capitalism Work in New York but Not in Moscow?" Can you see the telegraph, like the what she's trying to set up here? She's smart enough to discuss, like, she talks about how, like, when the Soviet Union collapsed and, quote, market forces were unleashed on the former Soviet Union in the early 1990s. She's smart
Otherwise
enough
known as the largest standard of living and life expectancy drop in modern history.
Exactly, Matt. But she's smart enough to acknowledge that, and she's like, people were stunned. Like, why didn't the markets work? But she uses that to slyly introduce the, quote, the cultural explanation. And it didn't.
Course,
yes.
yes.
And it didn't work because they didn't have the proper culture of morality in Russia. She said markets depend, like, all these free markets, according to her, depend on sort of like an informal culture of morality and fair play.
But if you're a moral person, you know, and you have like a moral cultural context, then you get to fail and then you get to succeed. And if you're an immoral person with a bad skull shape in a bad culture, you get crocodile.
Like I said, she closes this god-awful chapter by exonerating Enron and saying they're an easy villain, but another way of telling this story is that the incentives created by deregulation encouraged bad behavior because they were bad incentives. She talks about this like it just happened, and not that Enron specifically lobbied for them to be able to do exactly this. So again, any large corporate malfeasance in McCardle's world is forgivable and ultimately not even understandable because it's too complicated, and people and human society and corporations are just so big and complex. It's impossible to say why they fail, or it's even more impossible to say whether they're criminal or not. However, if you're like a single mother on food stamps or something, then it's very easy for her to say what your problem is. Okay, those are my 2 chapters. Who's going next?
I think I should. I'm chapter 3 and 4. And she starts out chapter 3 talking about the film industry, and she describes a film that was a blockbuster film involving water and with a temperamental director. And basically, she's talking about Titanic, and then but she thinks that she had led you to believe it was Waterworld, which was a bust. But she, didn't really get to pull that bait and switch. Anyway, here's what she says, or thinks. I fooled you a bit by telling you that it was arguably the greatest movie disaster of all time, rather than the greatest disaster movie. Like, no, you didn't. I want to meet, like, the knucklehead who's like, oh, no. But the reason I was able to get away with this is that the line between the two is much thinner than we like to think. So again, with the theme of failure equals success. But another part of this chapter, which he introduces, is the idea that nobody knows what's happening in the future. And this dovetails as well with...
It is where we are all going to be living.
Here we go. People desperately want to believe that prediction is possible, if only you're sufficiently smart and well-informed. We cling to this belief even in the face of massive contradictory evidence. But if that's so, why do movies fail? Studio heads are not stupid people. I object to that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
They just rebooted Ben-Hur and Tarzan
Yeah.
in the last summer to the grand total of like $50. And I guarantee any one of us could take like $1 million a year to just tell when they say, hey, we want to do Tarzan again, to say no, that's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
And you'd save them so much money that it would be more than worth it for them to give you the $1 million.
Yeah, these studios are dominated by the worst business students Dartmouth has to offer. Have you ever read Robert Evans' book? Like, he's charming, but he's not a smart man.
No. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't.
and William Golding, his famous line about Hollywood was nobody knows anything.
I mean, I don't think that she actually knows. She obviously doesn't know anything about the entertainment industry, but she like watched Entourage, and she's like, "Look, the studio executive is smart. He negotiated with Vince, and then like E fucked his girlfriend on her period, and that's also relates to business and failure." Turtle exemplifies why sometimes entrepreneurs who take risks are taking the least risk. The only good argument for her thesis is herself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because everything, she started off as like a conservative blogger, was like wrong about everything. Like famous Iraq war booster.
Oh, she famously, when the economist John Kenneth Galbraith in early 2003 for predicting that the Iraq war would cost $2 trillion. And she was like, these aren't even real numbers. I'd be shocked if it cost $70 billion.
Yeah. But
That's
like,
such a Lucille Bluth. How much could a banana cost?
yeah. How much does it cost to get the soldiers their meals? Even as the more time goes on, the more her beliefs are disproven. They're like, Meghan, here's a book to write about how smart you are. Your view of the world.
Matt, I think you'll enjoy the rest of this passage. Studio heads are not stupid people. They have every incentive to work hard to figure out what movies will do well, and they do work hard at it, commissioning survey after survey, paying professional consultants to do computer analyses of scripts, putting films in front of test audiences. That's actually those computer analyses were repurposed to run Hillary's campaign.
Yeah.
Certainly, they know more about the business than any of us, given Hollywood's famously opaque accounting, they have access to much better information about how much movies cost and what they earn. That's funny to me because, like, no, they don't have every incentive to work hard with the opaque accounting.
That's the entire plot of the producers. Is that the tax code is so stupid that they're often incentivized to be like, let's do an all-female reboot of
Platoon.
fucking Karate Kid. Lose $300 million for tax purposes.
It is impossible to know anything, and she writes, people cannot be treated like engineering problems. We have a very good idea how a piece of steel will behave if we heat it up to 1,000 degrees, but no scientist can predict exactly what you will do if you burn your tongue on a hot cup of coffee.
What?
You might spit it out, or painfully swallow. You might say, ow, or ouch, or
She's
start
not
swearing.
a human being.
Well, I mean, you know what happens when you cut a piece of wood, but but if you stab a human being, they could do a backflip. They could bleed.
I just had a terrifying vision of like Meghan McCardle running some kind of Stanford prison type experiment where she's just like, what will happen if you expose a human body to 1,000 degrees of heat?
Here's a passage that's apropos of nothing. Hedgehogs were more likely. Okay, she quotes some other fucking bullshit business manual that says there's two kinds of people: hedgehogs and foxes. Which I assume is like a Sonic the Hedgehog thing because she's a gamer.
Definitely.
This was just a funny thing to me. Hedgehogs were more likely to be very right. Think of Winston Churchill declaring Hitler's Germany an existential threat to Britain, while Chamberlain was declaring that he'd secured peace in our time. But they were also more likely to be very wrong. Think of Winston Churchill's disastrous decision. Guess what the decision is?
Killing several million people in Bangladesh.
Right, that's what I would
the
thought.
famine.
That's what I thought would be it. Any other guesses before I say it?
Go for it.
All right.
Gallipoli, maybe?
She's not going to say like. She's not going to say the starvation of the Punjab is like a mistake.
Think of Winston Churchill's disastrous decision as Chancellor of the Exchequer to return Britain to the gold standard after World War I at a grossly overvalued exchange rate with the dollar.
Gold!
Yeah, that is what I think of when I think of Winston Churchill's big, blunders and goofs. One of the reasons that we are better at building bridges than getting people to take their blood pressure medication is that we've run a lot of experiments on the structural properties of steel and bridges. Say you want to find out the effects of health insurance on health and mortality. I don't know. Ideally, what you'd want to do is take a pair of identical twins and give one health
Dude, she's
insurance
Dr.
for
Mengele.
Oh my
She's
God.
fucking Dr. Mengele.
while forcing the other one to stay uninsured as long as he lived, then see.
Holy shit.
Actually, you'd like to do that thousands and thousands of times.
All right. So these two chapters are more purely about business. They're more purely about failing in business and the nature of truth, which is interesting. But more importantly, these chapters are about Meghan's breakup.
Yes, that's what we're looking for.
Yes.
Let's talk about the breakup. I can't stand any more business talk.
Okay, so let me pull this up. In this book, or in this part of the book, so Meghan was engaged, right? And in her words, she was about a week away from the wedding. She was skipping down the subway platform.
Oh my God.
And then 2 days before the wedding, he says that he made a mistake. Can you believe it? She tried to get back together. They tried to go on a few dates, but then they realized they just didn't go together. Meghan says, where was I going to find another one? Where was I going to find another tall libertarian who liked the same movies and books as I did? I mean, she really, I guess, thought it would be impossible to find like a nerdy free market fucking
Who was
doofus
single.
in Manhattan. Yeah.
Wait, did she actually literally say she was skipping down the subway platform?
Yeah.
Okay, fuck her.
Yeah.
Anyone who skips on the subway platform deserves to be dumped. This isn't fucking Paris.
But anyway, she...
Hell, they deserve to get pushed down to the fucking track.
Get your shit together.
Okay, so the next chapter is it's more or less the exact same chapter, but it's about Dan Rather, fucking up the documents with the
The George Bush National Guard shit.
Anyway, though, I thought these chapters were interesting because they're all about ascertaining information, about obtaining info, about how you can use confirmation bias and chase good money after bad, and you go, oh, I'm already in this situation. Meghan exclusively relates it to her dating experience. She would rather talk about like when she got her heart broken by fucking Rand P. Hitler of the Manhattan Libertarian LARPing Society than the most obvious example of her using confirmation bias, of her fucking up information, of her sticking with a demonstrably horrible idea, her support for the Iraq War.
Yeah. Are those your chapters, Felix?
Yeah.
Okay. Nat, are you up next?
Yes. Oh,
Finally, yeah.
This is where she really gets sociopathic. This is good stuff because these ones are about big picture economic stuff. Chapter 7 is called Getting Unstuck, Adopting the Way of the Shark. loyal listeners to the show know, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how the neoliberal vision for the citizenship is to be a constantly moving shark-like creature that is never able to stop.
Yeah.
And we were positing that as just a hellish nightmare existence that degrades humanity. But for Meghan, it's basically the ideal state of being.
You know the thing about a shark? He's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eye.
So it starts off with her doing some actual shoe leather reporting at a job and employment training center in Buffalo, New York, where she interviews a bunch of people who have seen their job prospects completely collapse in the last 20 years. She gets quotes from guys talking about how, I used to have a good paying job at a factory, and then I got laid off, and then I got a worse paying job and a worse paying job. And she's very sympathetic, but then it's time for her to give a little advice to these poor northern New York slobs. And so she says, she's trying to decide, what's the difference between people who pick themselves up and are successful after getting fired and the people who just sort of drift along and sort of sink into long-term unemployment and failure. She points out that it's a tough balancing act. Do the right things and you have a good shot of turning a lost job into an opportunity. Do the wrong things and there's a big risk of turning a failure into a disaster. To see why, let me tell you about the worst date of my life.
Oh, my God.
And, I have a horrible, bone-chilling vision of her telling this anecdote to these poor, jobless fucks in Buffalo. It's you know what? You just got to keep at it. It's like when I went on a date in 2003 when I was dating a private equity associate. And we went out to a fancy vegetarian restaurant and then went to see, and this is literally it. She says that the dinner was fine, that her date was fine, but the show she went to was Avenue Q. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Yeah.
That's the puppet. That's the Slacker puppet musical. That was it was sort of like the Hamilton before Kinky Boots, before Book of Mormon was
Yeah, it was super popular.
And basically the entire reason this was the worst date of her life is because the characters are a bunch of fail sons and fail daughters, and she felt judged because she was one as well. That's it. It
The
was all
puppets
about
are
her.
judging me?
She felt like the whole show was being put on to mock her, and that made it the worst date of her life.
Well, okay, I have to
once
interject
again-
something. This is an extremely common trope. Lena Dunham did the same thing when she was talking about Jill Stein, but these upper class women relating everything to a weird romantic parable. It was this is just like this experience I had with a boyfriend. And it's perfectly summed up by this Rosa Luxemburg quote where she said, for upper class women, their home is the world. For working class women, the world is their home. Because they just literally can't conceive of anything more troubling than a shitty date or a bad boyfriend. Or in Lena Dunham's case, I think it wasn't even her boyfriend. She just kept fucking him.
Okay, so she takes this as an opportunity to flash back on what got her to her job, her first big media job, blogging for The Economist. And it was that she got an MBA from the University of Chicago, but then the first .com bubble happened before in 2000, and there was no opportunities. She had a short-term internship at Merrill Lynch that she apparently fucked up, and they didn't ask her to come on for a job. Then she moved in with her parents on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, doing Princeton Review prep. And then after 9/11, she worked with her dad, who apparently owns a construction firm. And she was down in the pit, I don't know what, filing paperwork or something. But I kind of feel like she's doing a little stealing valor here of 9/11 first responders. I was down on 9/11. I was
Covered in the dust.
I was processing forms in a trailer. So then she talks about how she lived with her parents and didn't get jobs and was struggling, and then she saw Avenue Q and felt like a piece of shit. And then, it's so funny because there's no, and then I did X, Y, or Z. And then I got called by The Economist, and they offered me a job. It's this Deus Ex Machina. But the thing is it's because, and then she goes, okay, this is why it happened. Because she'd been blogging. Because she had her nose down to the grindstone blogging at Jane Galt. and she honed her craft into a fucking, just a katana of libertarian wisdom so that, of course, The Economist called her. And of course, the unspoken shit in here is that she was only able to blog all the time because she was living in her fucking parents' house and nobody was expecting her to pay rent. So, but she basically takes that advice and says, like, you should do something like that. You should find something you like and really commit to it. Even though other people, normal pores, don't have the access to the kind of incredible feather bed that you do to allow you to fucking blog all day. But the only comparison she gives is another person who did what she did, failed to succeed, a little guy named Colonel Sanders.
I mean,
why Colonel Sanders?
Well, she says she told people this story about how she got the job after working herself to the bone blogging. And she says, I told my story to a lot of people, some of whom were struggling with unemployment and gotten a fair amount of skeptical feedback. I hope it was more robust than skeptical fucking feedback. How many people could write an Economist caliber blog? One friend asked me, and it's true. No one else is going to replicate my particular career path. Thank fucking God. The lesson is not that you should simply follow your bliss and rewards will come. Most people are not going to discover an unsuspected talent for economics blogging and stumble into a career in journalism, but they may discover something else. Do you know why we have Kentucky Fried Chicken? Because the government constructed a new highway, Interstate 75, diverting traffic that had previously run past Harlan Sanders Restaurant in Corbin, Kentucky. It was the latest in a long string of failures for Sanders, who'd spent the first 20 years of his working life drifting from job to job, quitting or getting fired for insubordination. And it talks about how he had a service station and he had a restaurant, and then the highway moved and he'd failed. But so then he took his chicken to the road, selling it to other places, and that's where Kentucky Fried Chicken came from. It says Sanders was not fulfilling his childhood dreams as a restaurant franchisor. Batter Dip Chicken was not a high destiny preordained since birth. His phenomenal success was born of a combination of bad luck and a penchant for always looking around the corner.
And that chicken mogul's name was Albert Einstein.
She really says that, like, no one else can do my job. I'm really good. Like, anyone can do your job.
Yeah, I mean,
one day Norm Macdonald is going to play Meghan McCardle in a TV advertisement.
But that's like, this is the only good moral in the entire book. The only thing that's true. You should never stop posting. That's like
never log off.
That's the true moral of the book. Just post forever, and it will work out one way or another.
In the analogy, she's Sanders, and the highway is the information.
The highway is 9/11.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
the chicken? Her blog post?
Yeah, Jane
Yeah.
Galt. JaneGalt.com.
But the thing, too, like, this idea that there's this prestige associated with The Economist is an excellent takedown of The Economist that we should post a link to that's actually quite old. But so I'm an editor for Current Affairs, and, like, we hate The Economist. But, like, we literally did what they did by giving ourselves a really boring name so that people will think we're smart.
Oh.
Like they're just like, oh, The Economist. I want to read about economics. I'll go to The Economist, the one the one economist who does the economics.
And look at me, I'm reading The Economist. Did you know Indonesia is at a crossroads?
No.
It is.
So the rest of this chapter it's incredibly long, and it ropes in a bunch of social science and anecdotes to make two incredibly banal points, one of which is just banal, the other one is banal and actively evil, about advice for job seekers. One, keep applying. Don't give up. Keep it up. Keep trying, even though it's discouraging. Keep applying. And the other one, which is, because that's just duh, but then the other one that is just duh and also vile is, oh, and have you considered moving? The Kevin Williamson shit, which, we've talked about before, and just like nothing highlights libertarianism's cold-blooded disconnection from any notion of human interaction or society better than their penchant for saying we should just have people move around to the jobs and create like these atomized pinball humans moving from shanty town to shanty town looking for employment. And just sundering all communal bonds along the way. I mean, nothing makes me more sympathetic to the tradcasts than reading this fucking garbage. But it ends. There's sort of at the very end of the chapter. There's a great punchline to it where she's saying, we should have She's giving a bunch of potential policy solutions for unemployment, and some of them aren't bad, like a WPA style thing for. In times of high unemployment or whatever. And then she says, and if all else fails, we can offer people grants to move from places like Buffalo, where there are no jobs, to Bismarck or Fargo, where North Dakota's oil industry has pushed unemployment down past 3%. Now, there's two hilarious things about that. One is now, in the last couple of years, because of the falling oil prices, all of those jobs in North Dakota have dried up pretty quickly. So joke's on you if you fucking pile in the minivan to and spend your last $50 to get to North Dakota and show up and find out, oh yeah, no, all those jobs are gone. And the other is that even when that boom was happening, those oil towns in North Dakota were just basically dystopian nightmare hells, like Philip K. Dick mining colonies, like the kind of thing that no one on Earth would want to live in, and the kind of place the community is basically impossible to form. So like Kevin Williamson, her recipe is just: have you considered turning just the world into a sci-fi dystopia? But there's one other thing I wanted to point out in the midst of this bullshit. She of course goes back to blaming Europe, right, and saying how they're shitty compared to us because they have structured unemployment and employment in such a way that it's more stable, but that leads to higher structural unemployment, and why that's bad. But there's one thing she says about employment in France that is absolutely fucking hilarious. When I was reading it, I busted a goddamn nut. She has a friend, this is the best part, she has a French acquaintance who had to let her nanny go rather than hire her after a trial period, because if she'd hired her, she would have had to keep her on for a longer amount of time and pay her more severance, and she didn't want to risk it. Which, I mean, nothing more relatable in a chapter about advice to people who need employment than their French friend who had to fire their nanny. But this is the best part. So this is what they have in France because of their tight labor policies that we in the United States have blessedly avoided having. Taking a new employee means taking on open-ended commitment to a person you don't know very well and who may decide to slack off once they become unfireable. So companies go to great lengths to avoid it. Instead, they rely on things like temporary contracts to round out their workforce. The people on those temporary contracts can't advance internally, and it's risky to invest in improving your skills for a job you might not have in 6 months. Those workers are more likely to stay on the margins of the workforce, poorly paid, with no benefits, and always at risk of unemployment. Holy shit! Thank God we don't have that in the United States. Thank God we dodged that bullet.
Look, if you guys are ever down on your prospects, like a story from my own life, you can either post forever until you're given a podcast, or you can make like my friend's food tester who got fired. And one day she got a call from the King of Belgium. And, like, that's what this entire thing is like. Sometimes you may think you don't have any prospects because you are an indentured servant to the pretender to the Carlist throne. But the Carlist may actually win, and that's a case of failure.
Sometimes you think you don't have any prospects, but then one day the prince is riding through town, and you find out that he looks exactly the same as you.
Yeah.
So the second I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the second chapter because chapter 8, blame storming and the moral of the financial crisis. Because I can boil it down to one thing. She essentially compares people who blame the big banks for the financial crisis of 2008 to 9/11 truthers.
What?
That's the entire premise of the chapter. But I did want to read the first paragraph because it's awesome. A few months ago, I walked into my husband's home office and found him yelling at his video game.
Libertarian men.
I want more.
Man, I'm so glad she was able to land herself another one.
I want more of Megan's husband.
Yeah, suggesting he play video games all those years ago, I inadvertently created a monster. He now reviews video games as a professional sideline. When I asked what was going on, he gestured excitedly at the screen. That racist goon is talking trash to me about elves, and I am an elf.
Holy shit.
Because remember, her husband is Peter Sunderland, who writes for Reason. And a few years ago, Reason published an amazing cover story about how video games are awesome and they make your life better. And it had this white asshole in a suit sitting on a bed playing video games while his annoying bitch girlfriend stood in the doorway and he was holding his finger up at her to tell her to be quiet. And now I know that is literally the McCardle's Sunderman household. We've gotten a glimpse behind the curtain. So yeah, so there's that amazing thing about the gaming. He's really into Civ 4. And basically she uses this argument this guy has playing Civ 4 as a parable for how people, when things go wrong, people want someone to blame. And these silly 9/11 truthers want to blame the government because they can't accept that it's a complicated world with terrorists and things in it. Just like these silly goofs want to blame these big banks for the financial crisis just because. But it's like Will said, she's like, it's complicated. People have the wrong information and they don't realize it. It's really terrible. There's one thing the funniest part though is that she makes the objectively incorrect claim that none of the big banks were aware of the shittiness of their mortgages when they were offloading them to their clients at the end of near the end of it. Which I mean, and she basically just talks about Lehman Brothers when she says that. And it's like, yeah, of course Lehman Brothers didn't offload their shit. That's why they were destroyed, and that's why they had to be bailed out. The one bank that does not get mentioned at all is Goldman Sachs, which made a multi-billion-dollar settlement with the government over the very explicit emails within their internal communications that saw them saying, these are dog shit, we got to offload them, and then they did. So she's just like literally lies in it. It's terrible. That's all I need to say about that.
I like the idea of her learning lessons from her gamer husband. And he's screaming at the TV all the time. I like that. This is probably just every guy that Meghan has dated. It's just always a guy who's like, Cortana doesn't have a gender. And she's like, after she broke up with one, she's like, where am I going to find another guy like that?
Okay, so I actually have like I had the last two chapters. Thank God I remembered correctly. And I gotta say, I mean, they're horribly written. She's a monster, but number 9 was on punishment. And it was a decent libertarian, anti-extreme punitive state stuff. And it was like, better probation, throw fewer people in jail. Granted, she did this from a cost efficiency sort of perspective a lot of the time. And you kind of wonder if she would have the same perspective if she was privy to all of the sort of monetization that is now going on within prisons. I think maybe if you were like, well, some of them you can make them sew wallets, she might actually rethink her position. But yeah, I mean, whatever. If she wants to fucking rally for less punitive prison sentences, like, then okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah, nobody tell Meghan what slavery is. She will lose it.
But then, of course, she goes back to being who she is, which is a bad person and an alien. Number 10, forgiveness. I'm not kidding. How I learned to stop worrying and embrace easy bankruptcy. Parenthetical, though not personally. Not personally. So the entire thing is sort of about bankruptcy. She doesn't really get into student loan debt, of course, because for people like me who are having their wages garnished because like I couldn't have declared bankruptcy. It would have been preferable, I think, to do so. It would have been preferable not to be in horrible student debt, but, let's not shoot for the stars here or anything. But she goes into sort of why bankruptcy law in America is so fucking good. It's full of fucking terrible anecdotes that don't make any sense, that have nothing to do with anything. It's very Gladwell. Spends a lot of time talking about this debt-free guy one of those radio hosts who's like obsessed with being like debt free, which is, insane and stupid and a horrible thing to fucking. I hate.
She should have wrote the chapter on that guy who's like, free money. The government doesn't want you to know about.
Oh my God.
Matthew, let's go.
She starts in at one point. She's bankrupt nation. Why do people declare bankruptcy? There are many answers to that question, but at the most fundamental level, it comes down to this: they have made promises they can't keep. They borrowed money and couldn't repay it. They had a kid, which comes with the implicit promise to support that child to adulthood. They signed up for utilities that let you pay the bill at the end of the month.
Okay.
So I guess the alternative to that.
There are many reasons humans declare what is known as bankruptcy.
They checked into a hospital and promised they would pay the bill when they checked out.
Well, fuck ups.
Yeah, like get your fucking shit together. If you want to understand bankruptcy, the first thing you need to understand is debt. That's such a fucking Peggy Hill fucking line.
Yeah.
That's so fucking like, and she's full of these where she'll be like, I have always said that the best way to start a fire is with kindling. Like when you just like pass off a thing that is true, like as like,
Commerce is the essence of business.
They have a saying that el failure is the same as la successa.
So yeah, she's obsessed with this Dave Ramsey guy who's always trying to, talk about, living a incredibly miserly, austere life so that you can like not have debt. And the benefit of that is, I guess, when you die, there's no existential, metaphysical thing looming. I don't know. I think everyone should rack up as much debt
Yes.
as they have to live a decent life.
We're all gonna die.
And let
We're
him
drowned
fucking-
in boiling seawater.
Yeah,
Buy a
let him
goddamn boat. Who fucking cares?
First of all, people do deserve luxuries. Like, little luxuries here and there. You're depressed, you're poor. You know what'll make you feel better? Spend a little money.
PS4.
Yeah, where's her PS4? And she's obsessed with this guy who preaches this like insane like austerity kind of living because
Sort of like debt is like sin. It's just like, it's like having,
which is there's a
racking
reason
up
why
sin.
this is heavily associated with a kind of brand of evangelicism now too, like the debt free thing. Like the Duggars are very into the debt free thing.
Oh, okay.
But at the same time, she's talking about how great bankruptcy is.
Here's the coda to the book. Actually, it didn't sell very well. I looked this up. The book itself was not a success.
How many?
Imagine that.
That means it was a success.
Hell yeah, bitch. Her next book, Right is Left. Why sometimes your dick falling off is cool.
Yeah.
Is going to sell 1 million copies.
Anyway, this thing was torture to read. I kind of hate you, Will.
Yeah, fuck you,
and-
Will.
Yeah, Will, what the fuck?
And Brendan honestly deserves like a fucking bonus or something, or a cake or something, for having to go through all of this terrible audio and filter out like
Yes.
the three funny jokes we all made.
That is
okay.
true. No, wait, that
Brendan-
is true, Amber. But I think my compensation, and believe me, I'm feeling this right now, is that I didn't have to read any.
I read this book at like 2:00 in the morning because, like I said, I was hoping that one of us would die and I wouldn't have to. But
I
such
still
luck.
hope one of us die.
I do too. I want to die now. And it was so bad. It was so bad. I didn't get to sleep till 5. I'm too tired to go to the gym. I have to go tomorrow. I'm pissed off. I don't like it. We're not. No more reading. No more reading.
I'm sorry.
No more reading.
I'm sorry.
No more reading,
guys.
Will. No more reading ever.
Can we
Yeah.
can we
Well,
just
we're not
bring back
reading
like a
anything anymore.
tradcath? Like,
Will-
can we get back to just like having drunk mean idiots?
Will, next time we do this, can we just watch a King of the Hill episode?
Yeah.
A Peggy one?
Okay.
Yeah.